Every single year, I see 99 ATARs with no med offer. And I also see 97 ATARs that end up becoming medical students. And that's metro students, by the way, not just rural students. So today, I'm going to show you how you can play that ATAR UCAT trade-off deliberately. My name is Farhan, I'm a junior doctor, and I've helped over 100 students get into medicine and dentistry across Australia. And today, you're going to learn how to confidently prioritize the UCAT and how you're going to accept short-term sacrifices to the ATAR so that you can maximize your chances of getting a med or a dent offer this year. So, in case you're not already aware, your admissions into medicine are a combination of your UCAT, ATAR, and interview. But realistically, throughout the year, you're working on your UCAT and ATAR simultaneously so that you can unlock this interview to begin with. So that's what we're going to be focusing on, the ATAR and the UCAT balance. Now, just as a disclaimer, before I go into the rest of the video, the numbers I'm going to talk about in terms of the ATAR and the UCAT, they're back from 2020 and from a metropolitan point of view with no special entry equity schemes. So if you are rural, the same concepts apply, just with different numbers. So still pay attention. I want to go through the 4 different paths that you can really go through in year 12. You're either confident with both the ATAR and the UCAT, or you're confident with the ATAR, struggling with the UCAT. Maybe you're struggling with the ATAR, but confident with the UCAT, or maybe you're struggling with both of them. So let's go through each one individually. If you're confident with both of them, then you can stop watching the video now. Like, to be honest, you're doing something well. If you're on track to get the numbers that you want, then don't fix anything about that, right? Don't fix what's not broken. In terms of the numbers to aim for, you want to be aiming for a 99 plus ATAR and a 95th percentile UCAT if you want to get into medicine in your home state. Whereas if you want to go interstate, you're looking at numbers like 99.70 plus or 98 percentile plus. I know those numbers are just insane to think about, but unfortunately, that is the competitive reality of getting to medicine. So if you're on track for these numbers, then don't listen to what I'm about to say. You already know what you're doing. However, if you feel like you are struggling with the UCAT, for example, then I want to start by telling you a bit of a story. So I went to a selective school. So we had a heap of people wanting to do medicine, and these 2 girls were no strangers to that. So they were going to be doing the UCAT in the middle of the year, just like everybody else. Now, in case you're not already aware, just to give you a bit of context, this is the Monash Uni admission stage, essentially. In July, you sit the UCAT. In September, you get your percentiles. In November, you sit your ATAR. And then in early December, you have this thing called the UCAT-only interviews, otherwise known as the round 1 interviews. Here, you get an offer for an interview purely based on your UCAT alone. So without your ATAR even being published yet, they give you a shot at the interviews. In late December, mid or late December, your ATAR gets released. And then in early January, very early January, you end up having the UCAT and ATAR interviews. This basically means that if you missed out on the round 1 interviews, you get another shot if your ATAR was good enough. So, unfortunately for these 2 girls, they ended up getting a low to a mid 80th percentile UCATs, which was not enough for them to get that first round interview, which sucked for them, right? But their journey didn't end there. They were very, very dedicated people and then got a 99.6 and a 0.65 respectively. And it was enough for them to end up getting those round 2 interviews. Now, as a result, they smashed those second round interviews. They got into Monash Med. They graduated. They're actually working at the same hospital as me at the time of recording. Now, unfortunately, that wasn't the same fate for everybody else. Everyone that got below a 99.6 didn't get that shot at the interviews. Everyone that got below an 80th percentile, they didn't get a shot either. It meant that they didn't end up getting that dream of undergraduate medicine. And by the way, those numbers were back in 2020. It actually gets more and more competitive every single year. But why do I tell you this story? First of all, is to tell you, just never give up. It is still absolutely possible to get into medicine despite UCATs that might miss those first round cutoffs. In fact, every single year there are people that are living proof of that. But the second point is, it's difficult. Your job becomes infinitely harder if you have a subpar UCAT because you essentially need to ensure that your ATAR is high 99s if you want to stand a chance at those second round interviews. Now, how about if you're in this position, if you're struggling with the ATAR, but you're confident with the UCAT? Now, just to give you a bit of context with what the competition with the UCAT looks like every year, you can see that the cutoffs for the UCAT go up every single year. So it started off 90th percentile there, gone up to 94th. It'll probably go even higher in the subsequent years. And just to give you a little bit of a reminder, here's what the admission stages look like. Now, my personal opinion is that I think these early December UCAT only round 1 interviews are key. And I'm going to tell you a bit of a story, right? I had a friend of mine that scored a 97.15 ATAR. Now, in case you guys aren't aware of the C scheme or the EAS schemes where you essentially get a perceived boost to your ATAR, there's essentially a system where, based on your disadvantages, based on where you live, you can get that boost. This guy, he didn't get any of it. His 97.15 stayed a 97.15. And if you have a look at the median ATAR to receive an offer in Monash Medicine, it's 99.5. Alarming numbers. But his UCAT was borderline. It was just enough for him to get an interview. In our year as well, we had people getting like the 2980s, 2990s, and they didn't end up getting an interview. So he was literally borderline on getting that round 1 interview. Now, on the balance of things, his ATAR was well below the median to get into medicine. His UCAT was borderline into getting an interview in the first place, but his interview was so good that Monash couldn't say no. He got into medical school, he graduated, and is now currently a junior doctor. You see, the UCAT really is your golden ticket. And the reason I tell you this is because a good UCAT makes everything easier. It gives you the chance for the first round interviews. And it takes so much pressure off the ATAR. I remember when I got my score for the UCAT, the first thing I did was a deep breath of relief, knowing that I basically had one foot in the door already. And I didn't have to put so much pressure on getting the best ATAR possible. The trends that I keep on seeing time and time again is that good UCATs make up for below average ATARs much more than good ATARs make up for below average UCATs. So my recommendation is simple. Pay the UCAT the attention it deserves because it really has the power to make or break your admission. Now, lastly, if you feel like you're in the category where you're struggling with both, the first thing I have to tell you is anything is possible. Look, I'll be real. You've seen the numbers today. Medicine is tough to get into. There's no denying that fact. And to be quite honest, you see all of this, smart work beats hard work. But the reality is everybody that gets into medicine understands that already. And they have that layer of smart work and then they do the hard work to just augment it even further and further. The reality is you need to work both smart and hard in order to get into medicine. But the reality also is everything that you need is online, like videos like this one, or videos where you can learn just about anything ATAR related so that you can keep on improving at that as well. Everything that you need is online. What separates people no longer is access to resources, but rather how much work they're willing to put in, how much of their time they're willing to sacrifice to make that dream a reality. And hopefully, looking at the previous stories and cases that I've just told you about, you've realized that don't neglect the UCAT, because it is your pathway to getting into medicine. So I'll introduce you to the UCAT leverage model, which is just a different way to think about this. Now, it's just one of the many models and frameworks that I've got for the UCAT. And if you want all my frameworks in one place, then just click the first link in the description below. Now, the UCAT and ATAR are two levers that you can pull as hard as you want at any point in time. But there are some considerations that kind of dictate how hard you pull on each lever. For example, the UCAT is time limited. Your exam's in July or August of every year. You only have a limited amount of time to do it. Whereas the ATAR, you've got a bit of a longer runway to do it. For most states, the exams are end of year. So there's a bit more of that time pressure for the UCAT. You've also got a limited amount of bandwidth. Look, if you can pull both levers full force, if you've got the support, the backing, the resources to do it, then do it. Don't let me stop you from getting that 0.95 ATAR and that 99th percentile UCAT. But if you can't, if you feel like you have to balance it, which is probably why you're watching this video, then you need to prioritize the UCAT. What this means in practice is that your SACs or your internal assessments can suffer. You might not be the top of your grade, and that's okay. Because you have to realize you're not racing the same race as everybody else. Not everybody in your school is wanting to do medicine. And you can make up for lost marks later. In fact, this is exactly what happened to me. I remember distinctly that the worst SAC and internal assessment scores that I had in year 12, I had in all of year 11 and 12 actually, was right when I was peaking for the UCAT, because the UCAT was all that was on my mind. I ended up getting a score that I really didn't like on my English test. And what it meant is that I needed to score a 97% or higher in the next exam if I wanted to get an A+ for English for Unit 3. Now, it was a lot to take in, right? Because everybody else is doing pretty well on that assessment. It was mine that was kind of lagging behind the pace. But at the end of the day, I got into medicine. So do I care? No, not one bit, because it got me to where I needed to. And look, by the end of it, I ended up getting 100% on the next one. So I ended up getting that A+. All that to say that you can absolutely make up for it later. And if you book the UCAT at a time where the school doesn't kind of get in the way, so you can get your UCAT done and then just focus on the ATAR literally for the rest of the year, then it helps with that, being able to make it up. So if you haven't already, check out my video for booking the UCAT, where I go through what date, time, and center you should book your UCAT in. So throughout year 12, you're going to see two different types of people. Number one is where they're just going to be chasing the next sack after the next sack after the next sack because they have to stay on top of their ATAR. And what ends up happening is that they fit the UCAT around everything else they're doing. They never make time for it. When they do sit down to practice maybe 2 or 3 times a week, it's sporadic practice at best. When they do sit down to do a mock, they never end up analyzing it. They don't improve on it. And then come July and August time, they're wondering why they weren't able to get the score that they wanted. Whereas there are other people that realize that's not the game they're playing. They're playing the game of trying to get into medicine, which means prioritizing the UCAT. So even if they're taking hits to their ATAR at times, they know that they're playing the game to maximize the UCAT so that they can get those interview chances in the future. Now, I'll leave you with this. I got a message from a parent one day saying, my daughter's exam is on the 27th of July, but she can't practice due to school assignment pressure. Could you please inform me if it's possible to change the exam date? Thank you in advance. And here's what I said. Basically, yep, you can change it. Just go on the website. And then I gave a bit of unsolicited advice. The UCAT is worth just as much as the entire ATAR in many states. No matter how well your daughter does in school assignments, she will most likely not get into medicine if she has a poor UCAT score. If your daughter's goal is medicine, under no circumstances should school take priority over the UCAT. Your daughter can get 60% in all her assignments from now until her UCAT and still be in a stronger position for medicine if she gets a strong UCAT score. The reason I say this is that too many students prioritize their school ATAR without understanding how important the UCAT actually is. Saying she can't practice due to school assignment pressure doesn't seem right to me. The pressure later on in the year won't be any easier. This sounds more of an issue with prioritization than it does a lack of time / too much school pressure. Now, come July 27th, I get a message saying, hi, my daughter scored a 2490 in her UCAT. Is there any chance to study medicine? By the way, that's 2490 out of 3600, not 2700. Back when abstract reasoning was still a thing. Or translated, that ended up being a 40th percentile. Now, in hindsight, there were probably more tactful ways to have this conversation, but the point still stands. You absolutely need to prioritize the UCAT. So, look, here's just a couple of traps that students fall into. Number one is trying to keep perfect SAC and internal assessment rankings and fit UCAT around it in leftover time. Number two is doing scattered UCAT questions with no mocks or deep analysis, then wondering why your scores plateau. And thirdly is panicking when your friends that aren't aiming for med smash their SACs and internal assessments, and then so you abandon your UCAT plan to chase that short-term reassurance. So, here are do's and don'ts. Do treat the UCAT with the same importance, if not more, than the ATAR. Treat the 2 to 3 months before UCAT as a UCAT sprint and ATAR maintenance. And do schedule specific mocks and mini mocks and analyze them in detail throughout the year. Don't try to keep being the dux of everything while your UCAT suffers. Don't just do some UCAT questions when you feel like it. Actually follow a structure. If you need a structure, go watch my creating a UCAT study timetable video where I go through the exact timetable that I would use. And don't interpret slightly lower SAC scores as failure. They're strategic trade-offs that you're making. So here's your next step. For the next 7 days, set aside a non-negotiable 30-minute window for UCAT practice. Don't let anything get in the way of this, because this is your way of saying, I'm prioritizing the UCAT because I know the game that I'm playing. Now, if you don't already have a question platform to do this UCAT practice with, then you can use the code Farhan for 10% off med entry. So for the next 7 days, go set this non-negotiable window, and best of luck.